Welcome brave souls to another chilling night with haunted graves after dark. Before we step further into the shadows, I want to know, where are you watching from tonight? Drop your city, town, or even your country in the comments below. Every voice, every story, joins us as we uncover mysteries the living fear to speak and the dead refuse to forget. Tonight, our journey begins in Richmond, 1961, where a cemetery hides a secret older than the city itself. The locals call it Evernight Cemetery, though it does not appear on most maps. Its gates, wrought iron and rusted, groan like the bones of the long-forgotten as you push them open. The cemetery sits atop a fog-draped hill, overlooking Richmond streets, which sleep quietly beneath a thin veil of winter mist. On nights like this, the cemetery seems alive, breathing softly under the weight of its own secrets. The legend that brought me here involves a bell. Not just any bell, but one that rings itself at precisely 2:14 a.m., even though the physical bell has long since been removed from the crumbling tower. Locals tell different stories, some say it is a warning, others insist it is a summoning. And many, far too many, claim that the bell does not ring alone. Something answers, moving unseen beneath the mist, among the graves, or just beyond the light of a lantern. I arrived at the cemetery well before midnight, carrying only a lantern, a notebook, and a tape recorder to capture anything unusual. The night was cold, and the fog lay thick on the ground, curling around the leaning tombstones like ghostly fingers. The air smelled of damp earth, decaying leaves, and something faintly metallic, like blood long dried but not forgotten. I stepped carefully over uneven gravel paths, my lantern casting long, wavering shadows across the graves. Some monuments were centuries old, moss-covered and etched with names that time had forgotten. Others were newer, bearing the stories of deaths so recent the earth was still soft and raw. Among them, one tombstone drew my attention, a marble obelisk marked with the name Clara Worthington, died 1959. Clara's disappearance had been one of Richmond's enduring mysteries. Her body was found 2 years after she vanished, inside Evernight Cemetery, though the exact circumstances of her death were never explained. Many whispered that her spirit haunted the bell. The cemetery was quiet at first, but as 2:14 a.m. approached, a subtle vibration seemed to pass through the ground. My lantern trembled, and the fog thickened. And then came the first toll. It was deep, resonant, impossible to locate, echoing across the cemetery like a heartbeat. My heart skipped. My hands gripped the lantern tighter. The bell, long gone from the tower, was ringing itself. Then I saw it, a shadow gliding between the headstones. It had no distinct form, just darkness shaped like a human figure, moving without touching the ground. I tried to call out, but my voice caught in my throat. Whispers floated through the fog, fragments of sentences broken and urgent. Do not leave. 2:14, he comes, wake him. I froze. Rational thought deserted me. This was no longer a simple story or superstition. The cemetery was alive, and I was inside it. Every tombstone, every patch of mist, every echo of the bell seemed to pulse in time with some rhythm I could not name. The shadow moved closer, and I glimpsed a woman in tattered clothing, her face hidden behind strands of dark hair and fog. She did not speak but stared at me with an intensity that pierced the lantern's light. The whispers grew louder, wrapping around me, filling my ears with urgency and sorrow. Then the bell tolled again, and this time I felt it in my chest. The sound was not merely heard, it was felt, a vibration that ran through the soil and bones beneath it. Somewhere, beneath the earth, something moved, something alive, something that had waited decades for this moment. I took a cautious step back, careful not to turn my back on the shadow. My tape recorder, blinking red in the dim light, captured everything, the tolls, the whispers, the shuffle of footsteps that were not my own. And then I noticed a detail that froze me more than any sound ever could. The mist around the shadow seemed to form faces, faces twisted in grief, rage, or warning. Some were familiar, like portraits of the lost, others were grotesque, almost alien. They lingered, observing, as if judging my intrusion. And then, silence. The bell had finished its toll for the night. The shadows retreated into the fog. The whispering ceased. The figures dissolved into the mist, leaving only the faint scent of damp earth and decay. I stood trembling, realizing that I had been part of something the city had never fully understood. This was no ordinary haunting. The bell was not just a sound, it was a signal, a pulse of something older, darker, and intelligent. Something beneath the cemetery had answered, and it had noticed me. I moved slowly toward the gates, my lantern casting long shadows behind me. Each step seemed heavier than the last, as if the ground itself resisted my departure. Before I reached the street, I looked back one last time. The tower loomed, broken and silent, but I could feel the presence of the bell, echoing in the night. And I knew that the story was far from over. Tonight, I share this with you, viewers. Tell me where you are watching from. Your voices, your locations, your energy, they are part of this story. Because every 2:14 a.m., the cemetery waits. It counts. It remembers. And somewhere, beneath the soil, it moves. The bell will toll again. Shadows will shift. Faces will form in the mist. And I will be there to witness it, as will you, if you dare to stay with me. So keep your lanterns lit, your doors closed, and your minds open. This is only the beginning. The cemetery remembers, and the dead will not forgive those who ignore its rhythm. Stay close, stay alert, and join me tomorrow night as we continue to unravel the mystery of the cemetery bell that rang itself at 2:14 a.m. The story will deepen, the shadows will grow, and the truth will reveal itself, piece by piece, for those who dare to watch and listen. As the city slept quietly beneath the fog, I could not shake the events of the previous night. The bell had tolled at exactly 2:14 a.m., and I had witnessed something that no history book could explain, a shadow moving between tombstones, accompanied by whispers and faces forming in the mist. But the cemetery had not finished with me. It was calling me back, insisting that I understand the secret it had guarded for decades. I returned the following night, armed with stronger lights, an additional tape recorder, and my notebook, determined to follow the rhythm of the bell. The gates of Evernight Cemetery groaned as before, as if they remembered my intrusion and were warning me against it. I paused for a moment, inhaling the damp, earthy scent that always preceded the fog. Somewhere within this silence, a story waited to be revealed. Walking the same paths as before, I noticed details I had overlooked. Some graves seemed freshly disturbed, soil uneven, small stones shifted. Yet no one had entered the cemetery since I had last walked through it. My lantern light fell upon Clara Worthington's grave again. Something compelled me toward it. Her marble obelisk glowed faintly in the lantern's beam, and for a moment, I thought I saw her name shift, as if the letters themselves were rearranging in the fog. The first toll of the bell sounded at 2:14 a.m., cutting through the night like a knife. I braced myself, and the shadow appeared once more. This time, however, it lingered differently, hovering near the center of the cemetery, its edges blurred, indistinct, but clearly waiting for something. The whispers returned, fragmented sentences floating around me: he comes, she watches, follow the rhythm. I felt a presence beneath my feet, a subtle vibration, almost like breathing. The earth itself seemed alive. Slowly, I knelt to examine the soil near Clara's grave. Tiny, almost imperceptible indentations ran like lines from the base of the tombstone toward the center of the cemetery. They resembled claw marks or scratches, but human hands could not have made them. My lantern revealed no further signs, no footprints, no loose soil, but the impressions were undeniable. Suddenly, I heard a low, guttural sound emanating from beneath the ground. Not the wind, not the trees, something moving below the cemetery's surface. My heart raced. I set my lantern on the ground and placed the tape recorder nearby. I pressed record, then leaned in to listen. The sound intensified, a dragging, scratching, almost like chains moving across stone. And then, a whisper, clear this time: wake him, the bell calls. I stepped back, feeling the air thicken around me. The shadow moved closer to the central crypts, and I realized that the bell's tolls were not merely a signal, they were a countdown. Each toll marked a moment in which the dead were awakened, shifting slightly closer to the surface. The cemetery was alive, yes, but it was not passive. It was aware. A sudden gust of wind extinguished my lantern. Darkness swallowed me. I fumbled to relight it, hands trembling, when I caught movement out of the corner of my eye, a figure standing behind a line of tombstones, just at the edge of the fog. Its form was indistinct, but I could feel its gaze, its intent. It did not move like a person, it glided, as if weightless. "Who's there?" I whispered, my voice quivering. No answer, only a faint, distant toll of the bell echoing again. And then, a sound that froze me, a soft, childlike giggle, layered beneath the low growl from the earth. I stumbled backward, my lantern swinging wildly. The shadows seemed to stretch and twist, forming shapes I could not recognize, skeletal hands, hollow faces, and eyes that glowed faintly in the mist. I realized then that Clara Worthington's story was only a fragment of the larger puzzle. Several graves nearby were freshly turned, though no record existed of new burials. Small objects, toys, or personal belongings, perhaps offerings, were scattered across the ground as if placed by someone, or something, watching and feeding on the memories of those buried. The bell tolled again, and the whispers became louder. This time, I could understand fragments. "He sleeps beneath, guard him, do not wake, follow." The sentences were incomplete, as if multiple voices spoke over one another. It was impossible to tell who, or what, was speaking. Driven by curiosity and a growing sense of dread, I moved toward the center of the cemetery. My boots sank slightly into the soft earth. Here, the ground was uneven, as though something massive rested below. The shadow followed, hovering silently just beyond the fog's reach. I felt eyes watching me, not human eyes, but something far older, far wiser, far more dangerous. I began to hear movement beneath the surface, almost like digging. The air grew cold, unnaturally so, and my lantern flickered again. The shadow stopped moving, and I could feel its focus entirely on me. My hands shook as I recorded the scene. The bell tolled again, longer this time, reverberating through the fog, the soil, and my chest. And then, as suddenly as it began, the noise ceased. Silence returned, but it was not comforting. The shadow remained, still hovering, still watching. I noticed a faint glow from beneath Clara's grave. Hesitantly, I approached and saw cracks forming in the soil, light spilling through as if something beneath was trying to escape. My pulse quickened. The whispers returned, urgent, pleading, commanding, "Do not leave, he awakens, the bell, the bell." Panic surged through me, but fascination rooted me to the spot. The ground before me began to shift violently, small stones rattling as if shaken by an invisible hand. And then, something emerged, not a body, not quite human, but a shape formed from darkness, fog, and what seemed like shadowed flesh. Its form was indistinct, constantly changing, but its presence was undeniably sentient. The shadow that had been following me stepped aside, or perhaps bowed in acknowledgement, and the thing beneath the grave raised its head. The bell tolled one final time, its sound resonating through the cemetery and into the city beyond. The whispering became deafening in my mind, repeating one phrase over and over: "He is awake, he is awake." I stumbled backward, almost dropping my lantern. The air seemed to thicken further, pressing against my lungs. I realized, with a sudden, horrifying clarity, that the bell's tolls were not simply an alarm, they were the heartbeat of something ancient, something that had been buried beneath Evernight Cemetery long before Richmond existed. And now it was awake. I ran from the center of the cemetery, lantern swinging, recording device capturing every sound, every shadow, every whisper. The fog seemed to follow, curling around my ankles, brushing against my arms like cold fingers. I didn't stop until I had crossed the gates, panting, heart hammering, and the first light of dawn began to creep over Richmond. Even in the daylight, the memory of that night clung to me. The bell's sound, the whispers, the shadow that waited, it haunted me. And I knew I had uncovered only the beginning of Evernight Cemetery's secret. The bell would toll again. The shadow would return. And something ancient and relentless, had awakened beneath the soil. Tonight, I share this with you, viewers. Tell me where you are watching from. Comment your thoughts. Could you hear the bell? Did you feel the shadows gaze through your screen? Every viewer becomes part of this story. Every shared experience strengthens the connection to what waits beneath the cemetery. The story will continue. The bell will toll. Shadows will move. Whispers will grow louder. And together, we will witness what lies beneath Evernight Cemetery, what has been buried, forgotten, and now awakened. Stay alert. Stay curious. And join me next time as we descend deeper into Richmond's haunted heart. For in the darkness, the past is never gone, the dead do not rest, and the bell always rings. Welcome back, daring viewers of Haunted Graves After Dark. Before we step further into the shadows tonight, I want to know, did any of you feel the chill from last night's story? Were you listening for the bell? Share where you are watching from in the comments below. Richmond, another city, or somewhere far across the world, your presence matters, because the dead are always listening, and the cemetery remembers every soul who dares to pay attention. The night had fallen early, thick and heavy, with fog drifting across Richmond like a living shroud. Evernight Cemetery loomed on its hill, more menacing than any human imagination could convey. I returned, knowing that the shadow and the bell had awakened something beneath the graves. That something, I realized, was neither dead nor fully alive. It had a rhythm, a purpose, and, somehow, it was waiting for me. I arrived an hour before the dreaded 2:14 a.m., carrying extra lanterns, a notebook, a tape recorder, and a small metal detector. Every story, every shadow, every whispered warning from the past had prepared me for this moment. Or so I thought. The gates groaned open, as though warning me against trespassing again. The fog clung to my boots, curling like hands that wanted to pull me back. My lantern cut a small circle of light, revealing cracked headstones, moss-covered statues, and graves worn smooth by decades of wind and rain. But something had changed. There were subtle signs I had not noticed before, footprints in soft earth where no one had walked, small bones arranged in patterns too deliberate to be natural, and faint, cold trails that led deeper into the cemetery. I moved carefully, following the faint trails toward the oldest section of the graveyard. Clara Worthington's tombstone stood as it had before, but this time I noticed inscriptions I had missed. Beneath her name, faintly etched and nearly worn away, were words that seemed to shimmer in the lantern light: "The keeper watches. The bell answers. Do not wake what sleeps." A shiver ran down my spine. These were not casual words carved by a grieving hand, they were warnings, left by someone or something that had knowledge of the bell's power. My tape recorder captured the faintest whispering as I knelt to examine the inscription, voices overlapping and echoing in ways I could not decipher. "Do not leave, he wakes, follow the sound." The first toll came at 2:14 a.m., as precise as ever. I felt it vibrate in my chest, a low, resonant pulse that seemed to awaken the very earth beneath my feet. Shadows moved at the edges of my lantern light. One shadow, larger than the rest, lingered near a mausoleum whose doors had long been sealed. It did not move like a human, but glided with intent, observing, waiting. The ground beneath me shifted slightly. I realized with horror that the cemetery was responding, actively, to the bell. I dropped to my knees and felt a soft vibration beneath my hands, something massive lay just below the surface. My flashlight revealed faint cracks in the soil, and through them, a strange, phosphorescent glow pulsed in rhythm with the bell. The whispers intensified, surrounding me like a chorus of unseen voices. "He awakens, he remembers, guard him, follow the keeper." My pulse raced. I knew the bell was not just a sound, it was a signal, and the shadow was a sentinel. It was the keeper of forgotten graves, the guardian of something buried long ago, something that should never be disturbed. I approached the mausoleum cautiously. The shadow followed, gliding silently beside me. My lantern flickered, and I could swear I saw eyes, glowing faintly red, watching from the darkness of the building. I dared not enter, but the tape recorder captured every sound: the scrape of stone, the low hum of whispers, the faintest heartbeat-like vibration of the ground. And then I saw it, a small figure, crouched at the base of the mausoleum. At first, I thought it was a child, but the proportions were wrong, elongated and distorted. Its face was obscured by the fog, but I felt its gaze, penetrating, intelligent, aware. It held something in its hands, a small bell, tarnished and cracked. It mirrored the toll that echoed across the cemetery. I realized then that the bell above and the one it held were connected, like a heartbeat shared between the living and the dead. The shadow moved forward, and the figure vanished. The bell in its hand seemed to resonate with the one in the tower, or the one that was no longer there. I felt an irresistible pull toward the center of the cemetery, where the oldest graves lay. The bell tolled again, louder and deeper than ever before, shaking the mist and stirring the shadows into motion. I followed the pull, guided by instinct and fear, until I reached a section I had not explored before. The graves here were ancient, some dating back to the 1700s. Names were barely legible, and statues had crumbled into grotesque forms over time. The ground here was uneven, disturbed, and warm beneath my hands, impossible in winter. I knelt to inspect it and felt the softest movement under the soil, like something breathing just below the surface. The whispers became coherent for a moment, a single voice cutting through the fog. "He is the keeper," the bell answers him, "wake him, and all is lost." I staggered back, heart pounding. Whatever lay beneath these graves had a connection to the bell, to the shadow, and to Richmond itself. And I had stumbled directly into its domain. Suddenly, the shadow appeared at the edge of my lantern light, solidifying into a more human-like form. Its presence radiated authority, like a guardian who had watched over these graves for centuries. It did not speak, but I could feel its thoughts, its warnings pressing against my mind. The keeper was here, and it had judged me unready, yet unworthy to turn back. The bell tolled again, one final time. The vibration hit my chest with such force that I fell to my knees. Through the mist, I saw faint, ghostly figures rising from the oldest graves. They moved slowly, dragging shadows behind them, their eyes vacant but aware. They surrounded me, forming a protective circle, or perhaps a warning. The keeper hovered above them, a dark sentinel against the flickering lantern light. I could not move. I could not breathe. I could only record, capturing the bell's resonance, the whispers, the shadows, and the faces emerging from the earth. The night seemed endless, time bending around the tolls and the rhythm of the cemetery. Finally, as the first light of dawn began to creep over Richmond, the figures sank back into their graves, the shadow faded, and the whispers ceased. Silence returned, but it was heavy, charged with warnings I could not yet comprehend. The keeper had shown me its presence, its power, and its purpose, but the full truth remained hidden. I left the cemetery trembling, knowing that I had witnessed only a fragment of Evernight Cemetery's secrets. The bell would toll again. The shadow would return. And the keeper would continue its watch over the forgotten graves. Tonight, viewers, I share this with you not just as a story, but as a warning. The dead do not rest, the bell does not toll in vain, and the keeper is always watching. Comment below, where are you watching from? Did you feel the pull of the cemetery? Could you hear the bell, even in the distance? Your voices join the story, linking the living and the dead in ways we cannot yet measure. Join me next time as we delve deeper into Richmond's haunted past, uncovering the hidden histories, the restless spirits, and the crimes that bound the bell, the shadow, and the keeper together. The night is far from over, and the cemetery remembers every soul that dares to listen. The night had fallen early and heavy, wrapping Richmond in fog so thick it seemed to cling to my skin. Evernight Cemetery rose atop its hill, more ominous than ever, each tombstone etched with centuries of sorrow, each shadow stretching like a warning from the past. I returned, knowing that the bell, the shadow, and the keeper had awakened forces I barely understood. What I was about to witness would change everything I thought I knew about the cemetery, and the very fabric of Richmond itself. I arrived an hour before 2:14 a.m., carrying extra lanterns, a notebook, a tape recorder, and a small metal detector. Every experience from the previous nights, the bell tolling, the shadow moving, the whispers, had prepared me for this moment, yet nothing could prepare me for the presence that now awaited. The gates groaned open, familiar yet threatening, as if they remembered my intrusion and were warning me against it. The fog clung to my boots, curling like cold fingers, and my lantern cut only a small circle of light in the darkness. I stepped carefully, following the worn paths, until I reached the oldest section of the graveyard, where the ground was soft, uneven, and pulsating as if alive. Clara Worthington's tombstone still stood, but tonight I noticed something new. Beneath her name, faintly etched and nearly invisible, were words that had not appeared before: "He rises where the bell commands. The keeper watches. Obey the toll, or awaken what sleeps." My pulse quickened. It was a warning and a command, written not for the living, but for me. My tape recorder captured the faintest whisper, "Do not leave, the bell, the keeper, he stirs." The first toll came at 2:14 a.m. I felt it vibrate in my chest, a low, resonant pulse that seemed to awaken the earth beneath my feet. Shadows moved at the edges of my lantern light, stretching unnaturally, twisting into forms that defied explanation. One shadow, larger and darker than the rest, lingered near a mausoleum whose doors had long been sealed. It did not move like a human, it glided with intent, observing, waiting. I approached cautiously. The ground beneath me shifted, subtle at first, then violently, as if something massive stirred below. My metal detector beeped faintly over one of the oldest graves. I knelt to examine the earth and felt a soft vibration, like a heartbeat, emanating from beneath the soil. My lantern revealed faint cracks, from which a cold, greenish light pulsed in rhythm with the bell. The whispers intensified. "He awakens, he remembers, guard him, follow the keeper." The sentences overlapped, multiple voices speaking in unison, urging, warning, pleading. I realized then that the bell was not merely a sound, it was a signal, a summoning, a heartbeat shared between the living and something ancient buried beneath Richmond. Suddenly, the shadow moved closer, solidifying into a human-like form. Its presence radiated authority, like a guardian watching over the graves for centuries. My lantern flickered, and I caught a glimpse of eyes, faintly glowing red, piercing through the darkness. It was the keeper, and I could feel its thoughts pressing against my mind. "You are unready. Yet you have seen too much to turn back. Witness, and remember." A soft, childlike giggle echoed from behind me. I spun around and saw a small figure crouched beside an old, cracked gravestone. At first, I thought it was a child, but its proportions were wrong, elongated, distorted, shadowed. It held a small, tarnished bell in its hands, which seemed to resonate in perfect harmony with the one that tolled above. The figure raised the bell, and the fog around it swirled violently, forming faces in anguish and terror. I backed away, heart hammering, yet fascination rooted me to the spot. The bell's toll was no longer a mere sound, it was a rhythm, a code, a pulse that awakened what lay beneath the cemetery. My tape recorder captured everything, the toll, the whispers, the shuffling of shadows, and the soft, distorted voice of the childlike figure. I followed the pull toward the center of the cemetery, where the oldest graves lay. The soil was warm beneath my hands, impossible in winter. Cracks widened, revealing glimpses of something massive, buried and alive. The whispers became coherent, a single phrase cutting through the mist: "He is the guardian, the bell answers him, awaken him, or be lost." Suddenly, the ground erupted in a spray of earth and fog. From the soil emerged a shape, not fully human, not fully shadow, but something that had slept for centuries, answering the toll of the bell. It rose slowly, towering over the headstones, its eyes glimmering with an ancient, sentient light. The shadows of the cemetery seemed to bow toward it, acknowledging its power. The keeper glided to the side, observing, its presence commanding respect and fear. The small figure with the bell vanished into the fog. The ancient entity looked directly at me, and I felt its gaze pierce through my chest. My tape recorder picked up the low, resonant hum of its presence, a vibration that seemed to synchronize with my heartbeat. I realized with terror that the bell's secret was not merely a mystery, it was a key. It controlled the boundary between the living and the dead, and I had unwittingly become a part of its ritual. The shadow, the keeper, the childlike figure, the tolling bell, all were pieces of an ancient system, a rhythm older than Richmond itself. The tolling ceased suddenly, plunging the cemetery into silence. The fog thickened, curling around my ankles, brushing against my arms like cold fingers. The entity sank back into the soil, leaving a faint glow pulsating beneath the graves. The keeper hovered above it, watching me. The whispers faded, leaving only a single, resonant message: "The bell will toll again. Be ready." I staggered backward, heart racing, lantern swinging wildly. The gates groaned as I passed through, fog swirling behind me like the tail of some unseen beast. Even in the daylight, the memory clung to me, the toll of the bell, the rising shadow, the keeper's gaze. I knew the story was far from over. The night settled over Richmond like a thick, suffocating blanket. Evernight Cemetery loomed on its hill, shrouded in fog so dense that it seemed to absorb sound, leaving only the whispering of the dead. I returned, armed with extra lanterns, a notebook, and a tape recorder, determined to uncover the truth behind the bell, the shadow, and the keeper. The gates groaned open, familiar yet threatening, as if warning me once more. I stepped inside, my boots sinking slightly into the soft, damp earth. Every grave seemed to watch me, every shadow trembled with anticipation, and the fog clung like a living thing. Clara Worthington's tombstone still stood, its inscriptions faint but ominous: "He rises where the bell commands. The keeper watches. Obey the toll, or awaken what sleeps." I approached the oldest section of the cemetery, where the earth was uneven, warm beneath my hands, and vibrating as though alive. The bell had already begun its ritual, a low, resonant toll that echoed across the graves, vibrating through my chest. Shadows moved at the edges of my lantern light, twisting and stretching unnaturally. Then I saw it, the keeper, hovering silently above the oldest mausoleum. Its form was solid yet ethereal, eyes glowing faintly red. Around it, the fog swirled violently, forming faces in anguish and terror. I felt the pull of the bell, a force that seemed to reach into my very mind, guiding me toward the center of the cemetery. As I followed the pull, I noticed something I had missed before: a series of ancient headstones, arranged in a pattern that formed a circle around a central crypt. The stones were worn and cracked, their inscriptions nearly illegible, but faint symbols were etched along the edges, arcane markings that hinted at a ritual older than the city itself. The bell's toll resonated with these symbols, causing them to glow faintly in rhythm. I knelt to examine the ground within the circle and felt a faint warmth emanating from beneath the soil. The whispers returned, louder and clearer: "He is the guardian, he remembers the crimes, the lost, awaken them, obey the bell." My pulse quickened. I realized that the bell was not merely a sound, it was a signal, a code, and a key that connected the living with the buried history of Richmond. Using my metal detector, I discovered small, metallic fragments embedded in the soil. They were remnants of old locks and chains, rusted with age. I dug carefully and unearthed a small, iron-bound box, covered in dirt and decades of decay. Its surface was engraved with the same symbols I had seen on the headstones. The bell tolled again, vibrating through the air and the ground, urging me to open it. Inside the box were letters, yellowed with age, and a small, tarnished bell, identical to the one that had appeared in the hands of the childlike figure. The letters detailed a series of crimes committed in Richmond during the late 1800s, disappearances, secret burials, and rituals performed by a clandestine group who believed they could control the boundary between the living and the dead using the bell. Each victim had been buried beneath the cemetery, their spirits bound to the bell's toll, awakening whenever its rhythm was broken. As I read, the fog thickened, swirling around me with a force that made it hard to breathe. The bell tolled again, and the shadows coalesced into forms more distinct than ever, faces of those who had been buried unjustly, their expressions twisted in sorrow and rage. The keeper hovered above them, watching, ensuring that the bell's toll maintained a delicate balance between the living and the dead. I felt a hand on my shoulder, icy and solid. I spun around, but no one was there, only the shadow of the keeper looming over me. Its presence radiated authority and warning. The bell tolled once more, each vibration pulsing through my body, resonating with the letters, the fragments, and the graves themselves. I understood then that the bell was not merely an instrument, it was a conduit, a bridge between worlds, binding the restless spirits to the cemetery, controlled by the keeper. Suddenly, the childlike figure appeared again, holding the tarnished bell. It raised the bell, and the fog responded, forming swirling shapes that mimicked the letters I had just read. The spirits of the buried victims rose slowly, moving in rhythm with the bell's toll. I realized with horror that if the bell were silenced or misused, these souls would be unleashed upon the living, and Richmond would bear witness to a nightmare centuries in the making. The keeper moved closer, and I felt a mental presence, a voice that was not spoken but felt: "You now know the truth. The bell must be respected, the rhythm obeyed. Fail, and the crimes of the past will be repeated. Protect the secret, or join the lost." My heart pounded. I had been drawn into a cycle that had begun long before I was born, a cycle of death, ritual, and supernatural control, anchored by the bell and its keeper. I backed away slowly, careful not to disrupt the delicate balance. The bell tolled again, signaling the end of this night's ritual. The fog began to lift, the shadows receding into the mist, and the spirits sank back into their graves, leaving only a faint glow beneath the soil. The childlike figure vanished, taking the tarnished bell with it, leaving me with the letters and the fragments of the past. As I left the cemetery, I felt the weight of the discovery pressing on me. I had uncovered the origin of the bell, the crimes that had bound the dead to the cemetery, and the role of the keeper in maintaining the boundary between life and death. Yet, I knew the story was far from over. The bell would toll again, the shadows would return, and the restless spirits would wait for the living to witness their truth. The night had fallen unusually early, wrapped in a fog so thick it seemed alive. It drifted across Richmond like a tide of whispers, curling around the streets, climbing the hills, and settling over Evernight Cemetery like a shroud. I returned, knowing that the bell, the shadow, the keeper, and the restless spirits had been awakened, and that tonight, the cemetery itself would test me. The gates creaked as I pushed them open, familiar yet menacing, as if warning me once more. I stepped into the cemetery, boots sinking slightly into the soft, damp earth. Every grave seemed alive with anticipation, every shadow quivering like a warning, and the fog clung to me like cold fingers. I approached the center, where the oldest graves formed a circle around a central crypt. Here, the symbols etched into the stones glowed faintly, pulsing with the rhythm of the bell. My lantern revealed tiny cracks in the soil, faint glimmers of phosphorescent light, and subtle movements as if something just beneath the surface stirred in response to my presence. At exactly 2:14 a.m., the bell tolled. This time, the sound was different, lower, heavier, vibrating through my chest and the soil beneath my feet. Shadows moved unnaturally at the edges of my lantern light, stretching and twisting into shapes I could barely comprehend. The keeper appeared, hovering silently above the central crypt, its glowing eyes fixed on me with an intensity one could feel through my bones. The air thickened, and whispers filled my mind. He awakens, the bell trembles, the boundary weakens, obey or be consumed. My pulse quickened. I realized that something unprecedented was occurring. The bell's rhythm had been disturbed, its toll no longer steady, no longer controlled. The spirits bound to its rhythm were restless, stirring with a force I had never witnessed. Suddenly, the childlike figure appeared again, holding the tarnished bell. Its form shimmered with energy, the fog swirling violently around it, forming faces of anguish and terror. It raised the bell, and the tolling grew louder, shaking the mist and rattling the tombstones. The whispers intensified, overlapping into a deafening chorus. I felt the ground tremble beneath me. From the oldest graves, skeletal hands and twisted figures began to rise. Their eyes glowed faintly, hollow but aware, and they moved in unison, guided by the bell's irregular toll. I realized with horror that if the bell's rhythm was not restored, these spirits could break free, their wrath reaching beyond the cemetery into Richmond itself. The keeper moved to intercept them, gliding effortlessly among the rising dead. Its presence commanded them to pause, to hesitate, but the disturbance was too great. The fog swirled violently, and the cemetery seemed alive with energy, a heartbeat out of sync, a pulse that threatened to fracture the boundary between life and death. I knew I had to act. The letters I had uncovered in Chapter 5 provided a clue: the bell must be acknowledged, its rhythm restored, and the keeper must maintain control. I approached the childlike figure, raising my hands in submission. The bell's toll resonated in response, pulsing against my chest like a living entity. I mimicked its rhythm, tapping my foot, whispering in time, aligning myself with the ancient pulse. The fog thickened, obscuring the spirits, but I could feel them circling, testing, probing. The keeper hovered close, its presence guiding my actions. Slowly, the tolling began to synchronize with my movements. The childlike figure lowered the bell slightly, and the rising spirits paused, swaying in place, uncertain. The rhythm returned, steadier now, resonating in harmony with the soil, the air, and the lantern's light. I felt a strange connection, as if the cemetery itself had recognized me, acknowledging my intent to protect the balance. The keeper's eyes glowed brighter, and the fog began to dissipate slightly, revealing the full circle of ancient graves. The spirits sank slowly back into the earth, guided by the keeper, their faces fading into the mist. The bell tolled one final time, long and resonant, vibrating through every corner of Evernight Cemetery. Silence returned, heavy and expectant. The keeper hovered above the central crypt, its form imposing yet calm. The childlike figure vanished, taking the tarnished bell with it, leaving only the memory of the night's events and the lingering whispers, "The bell will toll again, the cycle continues, protect the boundary." I staggered backward, heart hammering, lantern swinging wildly. The gates creaked as I passed through, fog swirling behind me like a living tide. Even in the dawn's first light, the memory clung to me, the tremble of the bell, the rising shadows, the keeper's gaze. I knew that Evernight Cemetery held more secrets than I could ever uncover, but I had survived this night. The night descended over Richmond like a suffocating fog. Evernight Cemetery, perched atop its hill, loomed like a dark sentinel over the city. The events of the previous nights weighed heavily on my mind, the rising of the spirits, the keeper's presence, and the bell's tremors. I knew that tonight would bring the full gravity of the cemetery's secrets to light, and perhaps, reveal the ultimate purpose of the bell. I arrived earlier than usual, determined to document every detail. The gates groaned as I pushed them open, a familiar warning that sent a shiver down my spine. The fog clung to the earth, curling around my boots and rising in ghostly wisps, masking the oldest graves in shadow. Every tombstone seemed to watch, every shadow trembled, and I could feel the pull of the bell even before it tolled. At the center of the cemetery, the circle of ancient graves glowed faintly under the lantern's light. Symbols etched into the stones pulsed in rhythm with the earth's subtle vibration, as if the soil itself had a heartbeat. The bell tolled at exactly 2:14 a.m., its deep, resonant sound vibrating through my chest in a fog. Shadows danced at the edges of my lantern light, stretching into forms that defied comprehension. The keeper appeared, hovering above the oldest mausoleum. Its eyes glowed faintly red, piercing through the fog and into my soul. The childlike figure reappeared, holding the tarnished bell. Its presence radiated an eerie calm, yet the tension in the air was palpable. The tolling of the bell was steady, yet something about this night felt different. The cemetery was alive, alert, waiting. The whispers returned, louder and clearer. The keeper warns, the boundary thins, the past reaches, obey or be consumed, protect the bell. I realized that I was no longer a mere observer. The cemetery had chosen me, or perhaps warned me, to participate in a ritual far older than Richmond itself. I approached the central crypt, where the ground seemed warmer, almost alive beneath my hands. The keeper hovered closer, guiding me with an invisible force. As I knelt, the soil shifted slightly, revealing more metallic fragments and remnants of locks, evidence of the ancient rituals and the crimes that had bound the spirits to this place. The childlike figure placed the tarnished bell before me, its surface shimmering in the lantern light. Suddenly, the fog thickened, and ghostly figures rose from the graves. Their eyes glowed faintly, hollow yet intelligent, and they moved in perfect unison, guided by the bell's rhythm. I realized with a mix of fear and awe that these were the souls of those who had been wronged, victims of the clandestine group from centuries past. Their presence was a reminder of the grave injustices buried beneath Richmond, and the tolling bell was the key that connected them to the world of the living. The keeper moved among them, its form gliding effortlessly, commanding obedience without a word. The childlike figure raised the bell, and the tolling intensified, shaking the mist and rattling the tombstones. The whispers grew into a chorus, overlapping into a deafening rhythm that resonated through the earth, the air, and my very body. I knew I had to act. Drawing from the letters I had uncovered, I began to align myself with the bell's rhythm, tapping my foot, murmuring in time, and following the keeper's subtle guidance. Slowly, the tolling began to harmonize, the spirits pausing in their ascent, their movements swaying in response. The childlike figure lowered the bell, and the keeper's eyes glowed brighter, acknowledging my efforts. Yet, the cemetery's power was far from fully understood. A new presence emerged from the fog, larger and darker than the rest, a shadow unlike any I had seen before. It moved with intent, its form twisting and stretching as it approached the central circle. The keeper confronted it immediately, and the air vibrated with a force that pushed me back, nearly toppling my lantern. The whispers grew frantic, the shadow approaches, the bell must be protected, obey, or all is lost. I realized that this was the consequence of the bell's disturbance from previous nights. The cemetery was testing me, testing the keeper, and the shadow was the manifestation of the boundary's weakness. The keeper engaged the shadow, a silent battle of wills, and the childlike figure lifted the bell higher, its tolling resonating through the fog. I matched the rhythm, aligning myself with the ancient pulse, feeling the energy of the cemetery surge through me. Slowly, the shadow recoiled, unable to withstand the synchronized force of the keeper, the bell, and my presence. The spirits of the past, guided by the bell, sank back into the graves, the fog dissipating slightly as balance was restored. The keeper hovered above the central crypt, its glowing eyes fixed on me, conveying both warning and approval. The childlike figure vanished, taking the tarnished bell with it, leaving only a lingering sense of the cemetery's power and the weight of the secrets it guarded. I rose slowly, my heart pounding, lantern swinging, as I realized the full extent of what I had witnessed. The bell was not merely a sound, it was a conduit, a rhythm that connected the living, the dead, and the supernatural forces that bound Richmond's history. The keeper was the guardian of this balance, ensuring that the boundary between life and death remained intact. The night descended with a weight unlike any I had experienced before. Fog rolled over Richmond like a living blanket, thick and suffocating, swallowing the streets and hills as it climbed toward Evernight Cemetery. I returned, lantern in hand, knowing that tonight, the bell would reveal its ultimate purpose, and the keeper would decide whether balance would endure or shatter. The gates groaned as I pushed them open, familiar yet threatening. The fog clung to the earth, curling around my boots and rising like cold fingers. Every tombstone seemed to stare, every shadow trembled, and I could feel the pull of the bell even before it tolled. The cemetery itself was alive, tense, expectant. I made my way to the central crypt, where the oldest graves formed a circle, etched with symbols pulsing faintly under the lantern's light. The air vibrated with anticipation. At exactly 2:14 a.m., the bell tolled, its deep, resonant sound vibrating through my chest and into the soil. Shadows stretched unnaturally at the edges of my lantern light, twisting into forms that defied comprehension. The keeper appeared, hovering above the crypt, eyes glowing brighter than ever, radiating authority and vigilance. The childlike figure returned, holding the tarnished bell, its presence calm yet filled with purpose. The spirits of the past began to rise, drawn by the bell's toll, their eyes hollow yet aware, their expressions twisted in sorrow and rage. Tonight, the cemetery demanded a resolution. I understood that the bell's final toll would determine whether the spirits could rest, whether Richmond would remain safe, and whether the secrets of centuries would remain hidden, or be unleashed upon the living. The keeper moved among the rising spirits, its presence commanding obedience, yet the balance was fragile. A new force emerged from the fog, a shadow larger and darker than any before, pulsing with rage and the accumulated energy of centuries. The keeper confronted it, their silent battle shaking the fog and rattling the tombstones. The bell's toll intensified, vibrating through the earth, the air, and my very being. I knew my role was crucial. I stepped into the circle, aligning myself with the bell's rhythm, matching its pulse with my heartbeat, my voice whispering the ancient phrases I had discovered in the letters. Slowly, the spirits paused, swaying in response, their restless energy stabilizing. The keeper's gaze met mine, conveying both warning and approval, guiding my actions. The childlike figure raised the bell higher, and the tolling reached a crescendo, resonating through every grave, every shadow, and every whisper of fog. The dark shadow recoiled, unable to withstand the harmonized force of the keeper, the bell, and my presence. Light began to pierce the fog as the spirits sank back into their graves, their faces fading into the mist, their sorrow and rage released at last. The keeper moved to the central crypt, hovering over the soil where the ancient rituals had bound the spirits. Slowly, the tarnished bell began to glow, a soft, warm light pulsing in rhythm with the heartbeat of Richmond itself. The cemetery seemed to sigh, the fog lifting slightly, revealing the full expanse of graves, monuments, and mausoleums. Balance had been restored, but at a cost. The childlike figure placed the bell in the keeper's hands, and for the first time, I noticed its true form, not a child, not fully human, but a spirit of the cemetery itself, a guardian of the boundary between life and death. Its eyes met mine, conveying gratitude and warning. The bell will toll again, but the boundary is restored. You have witnessed the truth, and the dead can rest, for now. The keeper glided to the center of the crypt, bell in hand, and with a final, resonant toll, the sound echoed across Richmond, vibrating through the hills, the streets, and the very heart of the city. The spirits, now freed from their centuries-long unrest, faded completely, leaving only silence, stillness, and a lingering sense of peace. I staggered backward, heart pounding, lantern swinging, as I realized the enormity of what had transpired. The cemetery was alive, the bell was powerful, the keeper was vigilant, and the spirits of the past had finally been granted rest. Yet, the memory of the night remained vivid, a haunting reminder that the boundary between life and death is thin, delicate, and eternal. The gates groaned as I passed through, the fog curling behind me, swirling like a living tide. Even in the morning light, the memory clung to me, the tolling of the bell, the rising shadows, the keeper's gaze. Richmond had returned to its usual quiet, but I knew that the cemetery held more secrets than I could ever uncover. Tonight, viewers, I share this final chapter not just as a story, but as a warning and a revelation. The bell is alive, the keeper is eternal, and the cemetery remembers. Comment below, where are you watching from? Did you feel the toll of the bell? Could you hear its rhythm in your heart? Your voices, like mine, have become part of the cemetery's story, linking the living and the dead in ways we cannot yet fully understand. The night is over, but the echoes of the bell remain, whispering through the streets of Richmond, through the fog, and into the hearts of those brave enough to witness its power. The keeper watches, the boundary holds, and the spirits sleep. Evernight Cemetery is silent now, yet it waits, as all cemeteries do, for the next toll, the next visitor, the next story to unfold.